Welcome, everybody, to the Crystal Water Experience podcast with me, Dr. Jo Whitaker. I have Charlotte Tedds here today, and we have an amazing story to share with you. And it's all about how to heal from trauma. Now, Charlotte's story is very delicate. We're going to have to be very careful about the words that we use. And if you've ever followed Charlotte's story, you will know what the background is. But we're not going to delve too much into those trigger words because we want this information to be out there and not to be censored. We know how censorship works on all of these platforms, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to share this story. But one of the reasons why Charlotte is going to bring this story to the forefront is because you can then see that her trauma is of an extreme nature. And what we're hoping is that when you see this for yourself, you will perhaps see that your trauma, however difficult that might be for you, or whichever hole you're in at the moment or have been in, you can get out of it. That is the purpose of sharing it. It's not about fear. It's not about blame. It's about, okay, this stuff has happened, is happening. What can we do about it? And this is exactly what Charlotte's done. And she's got many things to share today about her experience of helping others recover from severe trauma. And we're going to talk about that. So thank you so much, Charlotte, for coming on the show today and bringing us your story and the hope for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. No, it's a pleasure, and yeah, an opportunity to share information that hopefully empowers people to have confidence that it's all really within us to heal and not necessarily heal that we're broken because we don't need fixing. We're not mad, and we're definitely not broken. It's just our nervous systems are responding very normally to what I would describe as an abnormal world. So I think if we can reframe the language and start to take that self-sabotage away, um, remove the need to always seek other people, well, I guess the medical model that we've been sold, start to pull away from always needing to ask advice and get direction, and start to maybe learn a different way from people that have brought in natural remedies very successfully that don't require, streams of medication and endless therapy. Um, a lot of it is done, really through learning safety and what that's about. So, yeah, it's great to be able to talk about that with you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, my first question is, and this is something I see quite a lot, so I'd love your perspective and perhaps self-reflecting on what happened to you, is about, do people realize that they are actually in trauma and are literally reacting to their environment because of their trauma, and that their life is as it is because they're responding to that trauma? And or do you think people are educated in this and know and then go, oh, okay, I could do with releasing this because my life will be better? Which
Yeah,
way
it's
round?
a good question. I think. Yeah, well, I can only talk about my personal journey and then obviously what people share with me. So, yeah, I didn't know what trauma was, and my belief was, what you see on the news, the wars and all those kind of terrible things. That was what I originally thought it was, and then when I started to come across it in my work more and want to learn about it, it didn't take me long to realize that I was full of it in the description of a certain type, and everybody that I saw was because when I started then to look at the bigger picture of, and then you start to learn how the world is operating, you can't not be kind of come into contact with some kind of overwhelm or control or fear. So, yeah, it is. And I think, with your question, do people know that there are kind of, I guess, three types of people that I tend to see. And they are, you get people that don't want to talk about it. And they're happy to just get in the body because a lot of my techniques are body based that people don't need to tell me the story. So if you're looking at, your first responders and military, they're the ones that tend to, they just they don't want to talk about it. But once you get them in the body, it doesn't take long where that connection to the mind starts to feel safe, and then they can talk, because the two do go together. And then you get those that just have realized something's not right, and that's all they want to do is talk about it, which is fine. And they feel a little bit afraid to feel, because whatever has happened in their life has, made the body um, numb almost, and they don't want to kind of feel emotions, or maybe they didn't, growing up get a chance to do that. So then that obviously though we have that opportunity to talk, but it doesn't take long, everything's around safety. And once people feel safe with what this is about, and then they can get into the body, and then again you've got that that kind of comprehensive process. And then the last one I find is those that have had spiritual changes. So that's where you've had one belief, and then the trauma comes in, and then they've got another belief after. And this, the last 5 years, we've seen that on an epic proportion of people's whole paradigms have changed, and that has been a trauma in itself. So, when you've got other things then compounding, with your past, and um, people then, start to want to reach out and ask. So, and then when, for me, once you start to talk and explain about it, and lessen the shame and the guilt and the self-sabotage, and that we're all collectively in this together, it seems to, ease it, and then they can embrace it a little bit more, rather than, having this something shameful. Um,
Yeah, that is a really interesting perspective. And my own experience of going through this process, I think I did it pretty blindly, as in I didn't really know about um, any healing modalities. I did it on my own, probably about 11 years ago. But the numbness that you've just said really speaks to me, because that was the thing that made me really look introspectively. And I was talking to Kel about this the other day, that I'm the type of person that's extremely resilient. And and I've always been like this. And I don't mean that I hide away from things. I'm very happy to face my fears, always have been. And I'd say I'm not afraid of anything. And there's things I've been afraid of in my life, such as heights and spiders and situations. And I've always learned that the way to deal with that is to face them, and they become resolved. So this is something I learned naturally. So when 10 years ago, as an example, 10 years ago when I felt this numbness, do you know, I did a deep dive into what a psychopath was. And I really considered the possibility, am I a psychopath? Why don't I respond? Why am I just now completely numb for very many things? Anyway, long story short, I'm not a psychopath, but I did learn a lot about trauma during that experience, and about why people shut down, why people behave like they do. And then I was able to use that to reflect back on myself. And it isn't till the last like few years where I've been learning more about these trauma therapies. I was like, wow, I really wish I would have known this was a thing, because we don't get taught this stuff. We get taught you go to the doctors. And when I was struggling at that time, actually, I went to the doctors and I was on antidepressants for about 3 months, and I took myself off it because it wasn't helping. It was simply masking things, and I was aware of that. And this is the problem, is that people don't know where to go. And part of the role of doing this podcast is to explain how people are feeling in terms of their wellness, and it could be mental, physical, or whatever it is, and then provide them with routes of ways that they can deal with it, because they might not realize there is a way. They might realize that they're on their own because it's so not talked about. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing that. And I wondered if, without kind of omitting any key words, I think what I said at the beginning was correct, is the trauma that you experienced, I think most people would consider to be probably one of the worst kinds of trauma that there is in terms of possibility. I mean, there's lots of bad ones, but this is like a really terrible experience. And looking at you now,
So
you are
just
so much, you're
I'll just
glow.
yeah, for the record, I haven't actually experienced that, but I work with I've learned to work with people who have done
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, just for the record, yeah. Um
Okay. Yeah. So, so you going through, well, I suppose it depends on what you were thinking that I was thinking. Because um, I feel that whenever people experience significant traumas in their childhood, that seems to have a longer impact. And me and Cal were talking about it the other day, that our own traumas, if we don't deal with them in childhood, they just get repeated in later life. Okay. So the traumas that we were the traumas that we have as children really show up in our later life. And then when you're experienced, when you're seeing these people with these kind of traumas, Charlotte, how does it show up to them? How do people then come to you, and how do they come to the realization that this has happened in childhood?
well, the with the type that we're talking about, with the top end of what I do with the real high level complex, they don't know. Because it is so extreme and the dissociation has been done on so many levels from birth for some,
Mhm.
prenatal too, um, that there's so many kind of parts in the mind that they don't know this, and it's only as they get older that the memories can start to come through, and then that really depends on which part of the personality is going to come up and how much how much they're being controlled. So it's really complex.
Mhm.
And then they'll, for this type of clientele, they'll start to listen to, because now we've got these conversations and there's a lot of, more platforms that are coming available that are talking about this. And so they've got more resource to hear people's stories and then start to put together their own. And then
Mhm.
that's when they, start reaching out to people they trust who they can talk to about it. So and that seems to be a growing community now, more than
I
ever.
I was going to say, how prevalent do you think it is? I mean, if I was to think about this
Yeah.
type of trauma, I mean, like 5 years ago, I would have thought, oh, this is kind of a rare occurrence, but now I think it's much more prevalent than we think, right?
Yeah, it's really, really big. And when you look at how, the world has got to the state it's got, the reason it is here is because there are people in places that are operating under this type of, that have experienced that kind of trauma. Some have got to a point where they're that locked in that, there's no coming out and that they're on a mission. But they're depending on what part they play in this whole system of operations. So you've got your people in power, your corporations, your schools, your doctors, your nurses, vets, police, judges, um, they're everywhere. It's everywhere. And some won't even know that they are kind of what part they are playing, because the rewards that they get are plentiful. So
Hmm.
it it will allow that to continue. Um, and then you get, I wouldn't say lower level because there's not a level, but those that don't get rewarded and are just part of kind of this abuse system, um, they're the ones that are really the ones that are reaching out for help because they are literally being controlled to do things. So, when we see these false flag events um, and a lot of it is been dormant programmed through us through movies. Everything we see on movies, these glorious, like your born identities and all this thing. It's all happening,
Hmm.
and these people are controlled to, and they'll be activated to do certain things, and that's it. From your celebrities to your Hollywood actors, those that go and create a false flag event, and cause the carnage. It's operating on a level that it was taking me 5 years for my nervous system to get used to it.
I was just about to say, so you're listening to all of this trauma. How do you cope? Because I find that when people share things with me, especially being very empathic, you you have to really control yourself not to be part of that story, right? And also then you add into the other person's trauma by bringing your energy to it. How do you cope with it? And
Yeah, it's, you know what, and this is information for everybody because it's vicarious trauma, which is where you are absorbing the trauma from what you're witnessing, and everybody is experiencing this, and they're flooding the kids with it on the TV, so they can become go into a numb state, and so then they don't feel, because they're so young, they don't, their nervous system doesn't know what to do with it. But for the question for me personally, yeah, I had to. I guess the word is we use is titration, so do little and often. Um, it was I found it quite almost binge worthy because you're just so like this is happening, but then I would then go into a numb state. Um, and yeah, I couldn't think straight and really, really struggled at times. So I just pulled away from it and had a break, get back into normal life because that realization that me just absorbing myself in it is not going to change anything. But I knew that I was thirsty to learn about it, to understand how to help these people. So I appreciated this is going to take time and I just have to pace myself and almost like an apprenticeship really. I'm just going to have to wait until my body's come back and then I'm motivated, and my mind can absorb it again. And that is literally what I've done for 5 years. Um, and then it was about 2 years ago that I decided I actually want to go and help these people. So yeah, so that's kind of what I've done. Just take my time, break often, and again look after my nervous system with all the other things that I do, and I make sure, and we'll probably speak about this later, but there are three really important things when we're healing trauma, and they are that you're safe in yourself. So a lot of the work that I do is teaching people how to feel safe in their body. Being self in relationship, so whether it's your family, your partner, or your friendships, so that can take quite a lot of, awareness or changes that might need to be made, because that can create a lot of problems. And then safety in community. So I'm very mindful of making sure all of those are safe for me because it then makes sure that my nervous system's not going to fall when I'm approaching these types of things. And that's for
yeah,
everybody.
I think that's really great advice. And not everybody can cope with doing the work that you do because of what you end up finding out. And it seems like you must have very effective strategies for being able to deal with that. And perhaps people that aren't able to cope with that are because they probably need to deal with their own stuff without bringing on other people's traumas. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the effective strategies and some of the work that you do to help people. But in the meantime, I wondered if you could kind of share what when people go through these kind of severe traumas that you said, but there aren't just severe traumas that people are dealing with. And we were talking a little bit about the truth community. And there are some people, you can see these people within that community who have gone a little bit further than what you said. You wanted a deep dive to be able to understand certain aspects of these kind of traumas that are caused. But you did it very carefully. There are still people I know in the truth community that since I would, I don't like to use the word waking up because I think waking up means being conscious of something, being aware of the world around them. They're still in that trauma loop. They're still sharing the most negative things about what's going on in the world. And when you ask them to talk about, okay, what you've showed me that, what positive thing you're going to give me out of it? They don't have an answer. And to me, that's somebody who's stuck in a trauma loop.
Yeah.
That and also I think that the social media algorithms are really showing how much trauma there is in society because it is the most scary headlines. And those people sort of really kind of, yes, and this has happened and that happened, whatever. They're the people getting all the likes and shares, whereas the solutions-based social media posts, etc., don't get anywhere near much like likes or shares. What's your experience over the last 5 years have been on that topic?
Yeah, great description and people can innocently get hooked in because unless you understand how this works and the nervous system and states of hyperarousal, what happens when we kind of peak and it gets too much and then we go into this freeze state, and then the concept of entanglement is almost when people are already in a fight flight response, which is from living in this world, and then we find out this information. Um, there's a response that doesn't often get spoke about. So we hear about fight, flight, freeze, but there's a find response, and that is, we are genetically kind of driven to find information, to resource, to be able to solve a problem or build something or help ourselves. And that was very prevalent when 2020 came because they were flooding everything, flooding us with fear and all the things to get us into fight flight. But then our natural response came on to find information, for some people, not everybody, that fear would have come in and dropped them into a freeze state. So then they were where I guess the enemy wanted them to be, and then their behavior would change depending on what they were fed. But then we got like what you call the truth community. There was this need to find information. And then you've got this hypervigilance in find, and that's you're just really hungry to find information. But the thing to be wary about is that because your nervous system's in a state of hyperarousal, you might not be methodical with the type of information, or it's going to make you fearful. And if you're not aware of where you are, you're then going to go into this freeze state. If if that happens too much, the brain then starts to it does a little switch, and then it starts to control you. And so unless you start doing certain things, your nervous system's literally going to be pinging up and down. And when I say up and down, it kind of misses this window of tolerance where we kind of can love and care and create, take information on really well. We kind of miss it and we just ping. And then some people kind of hang out in hyperarousal, and then it's that exhausting, then they'll just drop, and then they'll be there for a few days or hours, months. It could be years. It just depends. So these two states of the nervous system, which is hyperarousal and freeze, I would say 95% of the population are in one of them. Functional freeze being one of the main ones, which is then you see this in the truth community. They're functioning in a freeze response because it's overwhelming. And then when they get that drive to move forward and do something helpful, it will be of the fear, possibly of the fear nature, or what we get fed with, the fear propaganda. It just kind of gets put on that side. And with the work that I do, I've learned so much in that this truth community all this is part of a plan. And so we're almost sitting ducks. And so if we don't do nervous system work and know where we are, we can't look at this information in a discerning way and in a way that we can start to regulate and not bring this find hypervigilance and you're like panic mode. You're not going to absorb information properly. So
Well, let's just finish on one thing. I was during my time of working out whether I was a psychopath. I also did a deep dive into psychology, and I think me going into that is just me explaining that I have no fear to be able to go into the deepest parts of myself, and if there's anything that needs fixing, I'm going to fix it, right? Because I am responsible for my health and my well-being. And there was this fantastic podcast on NPR. I can't remember what the guy's name is, a psychologist. And he was talking about what happens when you go into tunnel vision. And he explained that when you're in this tunnel vision mode, when you're in this fear, this fight or flight state, your brain literally shuts down and in many of its aspects so that you can only concentrate on this fight or flight. So they've done experiments and looking at IQ and problem solving and long-term strategic planning. And people were much, much worse at doing all of that stuff because their brains were shut down. And so people then, like you were saying about freeze, this is the reason why is because people aren't using the whole of their brains, which is what you just explained. And therefore they're not creating solutions to their problems. And it was a brilliant example about this lady who was dismissed from work from a mistake that she made. And so she knew she wasn't going to get some work for a few weeks. So she stocked up on random things like toilet roll, which I thought was incredible after. And I heard this way before 2020, toilet roll and a few other things. Completely didn't have any money. So when she started getting job interviews, she didn't have enough petrol to get to the interviews. And it's kind of the strategic planning goes out the window, and we can see this an awful lot, which is why I could see the women really going into deep diving into themselves, removing what they call the shadows or basically the traumas within us so that we can think strategically and take action and create solutions. And now I can see more men looking at this. So the gentleman that might be listening to this podcast, I'd encourage you to listen to the next part because we're now going to move into the solution stage of things. Now that we've just, explained that that there are traumatic things and the people even helping look after the traumatized people, the very worst of the traumatized people, have to look after themselves. It isn't just a case of listening. And the same for you guys when you hear terrible things on the news or, oh no, this plan is coming to fruition. You have to then move on. You have to do something about it. You have to create solutions. So, solutions, Charlotte, where would you start?
Yeah, so solutions. I guess really just being willing to explore. Yeah, I predominantly work with the body, and I also do spiritual trauma work as well. Um, but the body is a really safe place to start with because you don't need to be talking about anything if you don't want to. And then I guess you can talk to people to help you, but there's so many types of body work that you can do. There's like 10, 15 types. And you can start with something simple as which probably what most people have already started with, like going for a massage or they're used to visiting a chiropractor or a physio because that's medically accepted, it's wide available and people trust it. So people have already probably engaged in some kind of body work or they've been to a yoga class or they've done some movement of some kind. But then to really take it into a state of safety and healing is we start working with the body on a somatic level and we're really looking at how safe the body actually feels when it starts to pay attention to itself. And we're looking at you know how numb the body is. Um, and when we start doing these modalities, so I do lots of different techniques from gentle movement, where we are connecting the breath with very, very gentle movement, very slow. Um, and what this does is it switches off emotional reflexes in the body. Is when we experience overwhelm of any kind, the body goes into these reflexes and it holds that tension pattern. So when we are, walking around and doing our things, and you see people with all these postures, um, that is because life has come through on an emotional level and created this contracture in the soft tissue, and it then it doesn't hold, so it's 100% effort, but it could be a low grade 10, 20% effort, and the person doesn't know they're holding it. Um, and then it's this kind of thing that then contributes, to your back pain, or you injure yourself, or so emotional overwhelm is, to me, is the groundwork of anybody's body work. And then so yeah, doing simple things coming into the body that way. And then I go to kind of more I would say profound release, and I use a technique called tension and trauma release exercises,
Hmm.
TRE. It's quite well, it's getting more well known now, created by Dr. David Baselli. And yeah, to me, the whole world it should have this in their toolkit, as a way of self-regulating. We're genetically encoded to do it anyway. We've just been socially conditioned to not be familiar with it, and that can heal so much without even needing to kind of go to a therapist so much. Maybe to get started, and then you've got the option of being part of a community and continuing it. And so yeah, there's so from the basic breathing and connecting with simple movement to then that top end, and then there's loads of different techniques in between that you can find whichever suits you, because not everybody likes the same thing, and it's really giving people choice and empowering them to know that these things are there, and then they can choose and really take ownership of noticing what's in the body, and not being scared of it if we can, because that's really where it all starts to happen once we kind of meet ourselves and find a safe community and people that you trust.
That's beautifully said. So there's some great takeaways here. Is one, you don't necessarily need to share with a stranger all the traumatic events that have happened to you, however bad or minor that they are. That there are physical methodologies that can help release that trauma because it's actually trapped in your body, and that there are many experts out there like Charlotte that you can go to get you started. And there's no shame in going there because 95% of people have this situation. So most of the people listening to this podcast, it is you, and you might not have even thought about this before. And why don't we focus now, Charlotte, on the impact that can have? What have you seen with these deeply traumatized people, or people that, in terms of what's happened in their life, how it's impacting their life negatively, and how doing this kind of trauma release has then released them, freed them?
Yeah, so two parts to that question. So how I've known, 'cause I worked in the medical field for 20 years before doing this, and that journey really opened my eyes to seeing that, well, one, we're kind of trained to just stay in a lane and not really look out. So that limits us. But working with all the conditions, all the chronic conditions that you'd see, the pain, it would all lead down to stress when you start going down the rabbit hole of what's the cause, what's the cause, what's the cause. And once I found that stress was the core to me of all of that, I wanted to start bringing in, why aren't we dealing with stress as the first port of call before we start talking about the problem, or the medicine solution, which they get sold. But I couldn't. No one really wanted to. The system didn't really want to know that, because they need all these controlled trials and all the things. Um, so yeah, I just kind of went on my own, pulled out the system and started to go on my own journey and learn all the ways that you could de-stress the body. And it was on that journey that you come across other entrepreneurs that have figured the same in the system, doctors, psychiatrists, who have been what you would call rebels in their profession. Um, and they're all talking the same thing, that illnesses that present, every illness that you see is coming down to some kind of trapped energy somewhere, some trauma or stress, and then that's just compound with And when I say trauma, it is emotional, but we also get traumatized chemically, and we get traumatized financially, and physically and spiritually. So all of those um, have an impact and to me create the cause of the illness. And so once you start working with people, and particularly people that are willing to do it, and there are three kind of components that to me are, once you get these components in place, you can see dramatic change. And the first one is the person believing that they're worthy of doing it, because I find that is the sole kind of deep, dark reason why people subconsciously won't go there, or they'll sabotage the therapy, because it's like a learned behavior through which has been given by society to you. It's not yours. Um, Once they kind of feel that they're worthy, and then they're in safe relationship, and they've got a safe person, or the therapist they feel safe with, um, and then learning about the nervous system and being willing to take on board this information. Once you do that, it just changes. Yeah, pain reduces, movement improves, capacity of the nervous system gets better. They start saying the no's that maybe should be needed to say to certain people. Um, that's a game changer. I spend most of my time coaching people how to say no and build capacity in the nervous system so they can say no. Probably one of the fundamental biggest shifts you can make, but it's scary and it's hard. So we need to build capacity to be able to say the no. Um, and then learning what your yeses are. So yes is to saying things that are going to nurture your nervous system, and yes to the people that you want to spend the time with, and yes to the sleep that you want to have guilt free, or the foods, so it's really a yes no balance in the end, but you just see so much change, and it's and there's no medicine needed. No medicine. It's
That's a great testimony. And it's also my experience of being a personal trainer that exactly what you say, that the reason why most people don't do it is that, they say it's time and it's this, that, and the other, but it's not. It's they don't feel worthy. Their kids come first, my husband comes first, my job comes first, and all these kind of things, because and it always just boils down to themselves, that they don't feel that they are allowed to love themselves. And that and I just want to say something about that, because especially if you've got children or you've got loved ones around you, is they are watching you. And if you are always putting somebody else first, when they grow up, and when they behave like you, they won't be putting themselves first either, because you've just taught them to do that. You just taught them that they are not worthy. So everybody is going around this loop. And the reason why that's important, because maybe that would work if everybody put everybody else first, that would be great because somebody gets first. But the problem with that is that, A, not everybody is so kind of, there is a lot of kind of fearful and distraction things going on in our world at the moment. So that's not very easy. But the other thing is, I'm just going to make a comment, but also ask your opinion is, I don't believe somebody else can heal your trauma. You have to do it as much as you want to. And I certainly spent a long time trying to do that to other people myself. It doesn't matter how important it is, how much of a desperate situation they're in, etc. By talking to them or whatever, you cannot heal it. They have to do it themselves. Is
yeah.
that your experience, or is there a magic book or a magic spell that
Oh,
could do this?
you said that amazingly. Yeah, it is. It's because if that person, and again, it's self-worth, it all comes down to that, and we can work on self-worth. So even if people identify that and we know that's a stumbling block, then we work on that. And once we can build that up, then everything just flourishes. So it's not that, if you realize you don't feel worthy, or I can't attempt to get any help because, well, we get help, we go and say that, because
Mhm.
that's the most common thing that everybody has.
Mhm.
Um, and when you just said then about the kids, it was I've noticed that with my family. I've got three children, and the first two, I wasn't aware of a lot of these things, and so my survival behaviors were being transferred through, the monkey see, monkey do thing. My third one, it's a completely different child, and um, because my boundaries are very clear now, in a loving way,
Mhm.
it's all done in a loving way. She is so empowered and so knows herself, and her nervous system's going to be fine. But that's because I took care of mine. So I've witnessed both sides. And interestingly, when I had my third, I remember the midwife actually said something quite profound to me. She said, you're the nucleus of your family. So if you're not taking care of yourself, the family can fall apart. And and that's, it really landed with me because then it opens up to, but if you're not in a state where you know how to do it because we've experienced all this stuff, then that's when, we want to be reaching out and knowing that we are the first port of call, to do this. And getting back to your question, if somebody there is no magic wand, you do have to do it yourself. And those that maybe um don't believe that they can do it, or they don't want to, you can't really, I can't really help them, because if I did, I would then, this, you're bringing on your compassion fatigue in myself, because all I want to do is see somebody well, but you can only meet somebody as far as they want to come themselves. And I've done that. I've burnt out plenty of times doing that. And people do that. So that's a whole thing in itself. And so boundary work it just fascinates me, because once you start to get clear on where your boundaries are, your life changes dramatically. It's a beautiful thing to witness. It took me 10 years to learn it. So yeah, it's not a weekend course. Uh, it's and then seeing it in others is just, it's amazing, because it's our God-given right, it's to have this, and knowing what we know about the world, and now it's just wanted to get everybody, in a low vibrational slave state. All I see is, how can we get people lifted and get them back to this inner strength and inner wisdom, love. And once you start connecting to that, it's just amazing. We're amazing. Um, so yeah, that's how I see the world.
I think that's beautifully put, Charlotte. And I can remember right at the beginning of kind of going down the rabbit holes because it took me 18 months to find anybody else awake. It was a very kind of lonely time. But during that time of even being completely alone, I didn't find anybody else that thought the same. I decided that I was going to fight, and that was my terms then. And then as I was doing this, I'm going to do something about it because I've got nothing else to lose. Then I started hearing all this stuff about healing myself, and I was like, and healing my inner child and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, what are you talking about? And healing yourself is going to be everything is within, and healing is within is going to heal without. And I thought that didn't make any sense. But now we've gone through that journey, it makes perfect sense. So we're saying those same things back to people, really comprehending that if you haven't done this part yet, and all you are is aware of the world and the government and that sort of thing, you haven't done this bit yet. And there is brilliant light in the tunnel. It is the only way. Just knowing stuff is not going to get anywhere. The solutions are going to lie in those people that have managed to release all that trauma, because their brains are now switched on and they can think more clearly. So their strategies and what they do on a daily basis is much more effective. What do you think about that?
Yeah, perfect, because it you know the people in the power, well, obviously the ones that think they've got the power, um, they they create trauma to create mind control. And so once we heal our trauma, that's to me one of the most fundamental activisms we can do, uh, because then we can't be mind controlled. And that's even in the truth community, because
Mhm.
you see it is happening. They're being led, their energy's being drained, and that's to their liking, the enemy's liking. So yeah, to me it's the most important thing, because we want our vibration higher, and we want to be, and when we get more capacity in the nervous system, you can think clear, you can, you're creative, um and the best thing is you can experience more joy, because that's what they don't want us to experience. Because if they did, they won't put what they put on the news and drown everybody in just the misery. um we want the joy, and we want to experience, those the beautiful things in life, and the conversations, and yeah. So it's, yeah, no, what you said then was perfect.
And we've all been through it, haven't we, where we've told everybody about what's gone on in the world. But if you're still doing it now, you haven't got over this lesson. And actually, from what Charlotte was just explaining, is you're just passing on more trauma. You're just allowing more people to be mind controlled. And that might sound like, you know, it might sound far-fetched, but the whole kind of truth of community, it is also a psyop, but it's also an opportunity for us to share this information. So everything's a double-edged sword. There's never always kind of one reason. And, whatever negative comes out of these scenarios, there's always a positive. But they're not going to present you with a positive. That is within you and your actions. And so every single day, I think that people need to be, this is what I say to people, if you're going to tell people one negative thing for educational purposes, because people need to know, because the truth will set us free, say one thing that is the counter. Okay, what can we do about it? Or what positive thing can I do? Can I create a community today? Can I do this? Can I do that? What is it? And if you don't know what that positive counteraction is, you need to do your research,
Yeah.
which is back to you. Do your research, because there is one. And if you don't know what it is, it's because you're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, and I think that conscious awareness and having a little blueprint to fall back on, because then you're becoming perfect victim of what the enemy want you, even though you're in the truth world, you're being played. And when I used to do body work, when we were taught that, we was taught, we always had to give three positive, because when you do body work, that people are stripped down to their underwear, because you're looking at postures to try and change them, and it can be very vulnerable for people. So making them feel safe, and I mean, I did this anyway. It was just a natural thing, but we were specifically taught, give three positives about what you see, and you just give one negative. The negative being, maybe something's a bit out of line or whatever. And even when I did some business training, they always say give the honey before the vinegar, or give the solution before you give a problem. Or yeah. So I think just trying to be solution based, and that is a a brain retraining process for sure, because people are just in a loop.
Habit, a habit. It is a habit. And you know who those peoples are in your written box sharing things, or people you go to see. And this is your thing, is to have compassion for them, because you know that they're in a trauma loop. They're not
Yeah.
doing it on purpose. They're not trying to do it to annoy you. They're in a trauma
Yeah.
loop, and need to get out of it. And maybe you can see that in yourself now, or maybe you can see it in the people around you, and maybe you could gently guide them to Charlotte's website. Here's a solution. Um, can you see your website? I'm not sure I'm sharing the right
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
Oh, great, great. So this is called embraceflow.co.uk. You have one-to-one consultations and group bookings, and it's got all the information here that people might need to know, that we shared today, but kind of in a more kind of written form, and classes and things that people can do. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your website, Charlotte, and how people tend to contact you?
Yeah. So the website, actually, I don't actually get, because I've not done my CEO. I'm not that technically minded.
SEO, yeah.
SEO, yeah. I don't. It always just comes through recommendations, so it looks all glorified and lovely. But yeah,
Is it
uh,
Facebook you get more?
it'll be some Instagram messages, or it's just the community, word of mouth.
Right.
Word of mouth has been probably my strongest referral base. But I do get some on here where it pops up because it this is really a place where they can learn about it and read a bit at their pace, particularly when you're starting to encroach on this. It is always nice to read something and to see if it resonates with you, because if it doesn't, then it's not for you. And then the free consultation is really a chance then I can you tell me a little bit about what's concerning you, and then we have a phone call and an informal chat where we can you can share what's on your mind or have any questions, and then we can, decide if that's something, you want to move forward with. So yeah, and we do breath work, strengthening, and all natural. And then also looking at the chemical load, reducing with toxic free. I make all my own products, and um,
Oh, they're
trying to
gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah, they're
educate
gorgeous.
educate people on the way the nervous system's being affected with the chemicals that are around us. I think that, and like, everything you do with the water, I think you start looking at those and you match it with doing this work, and you're going to be flying.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. It isn't just a mental thing, it is an environmental thing. And it's very surprising to people that when they start taking out these toxins from their environment, that like endocrine modulators and things like this, that their mindset changes. And this
Yeah.
is why you see people that do a detox, they often give up on addictions that they've had. They often give up smoking and drinking and things like this. And they realize, well, maybe this wasn't a mental thing after all. Maybe this was in my environment. And this is true of these kind of exercises as well, which I was just having a quick look on here. They might look simple, but they are incredibly effective. And I have a nice little trauma kitty here that helps.
Oh yeah,
She's
animals, yeah.
she, she's just come and joined the party talking about this. So if people would, so guys, if you look on the notes for wherever you're hearing this podcast or on YouTube, you'll be able to see Charlotte's social links. But if people look at you on just for the people listening, although the notes will be there, will they find Embrace Flow on
Yeah.
Instagram? Embrace Flow on
Just
Instagram.
my name. So Instagram, it's just my name, Charlotte Teds, and you can drop me a message, and yeah, you can find me that way, or embracelow.co.uk. And it's my name on all the other socials.
Right,
So yeah.
Charlotte Ted. Brilliant. Thank you so much for everything you've said today. Is there anything you want to finish off with?
Really, just to say thank you for having this conversation, and allowing me to share it with you, and all the great work that you're doing with the water, and yeah, just to be able to marry all these together and people to pick out, you can pick out really big kind of foundational rocks of improvement that are going to make a big shift in your nervous system, and like you said there, the environmental and the body is yeah, you a great way to marry them together. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on and sharing that with people. And I just encourage you guys to consider what Charlotte said today. She's got a great deal of experience. If it's something that you're at least just wondering about, and perhaps your life isn't exactly as you want it to be, maybe you are one of these 95% of people with trauma, and you can release it and your life will be better. It's all in your hands. No one's going to do it for you, and the government's definitely not going to do it for you. So if you want to stick to things up at the establishment, get yourself well and join us. That's the best thing. I think that's probably one of the best messages that's came out today. I think it's absolutely true. That's what sovereignty and freedom is. It all comes from within. So thank you so much to Charlotte for being on the show. Crystal Water Experience podcast, we bring wonderful people like Charlotte on to discuss and discover things that you might not be aware of. and we want to share them on a platform so you can learn more and hopefully be, knowledge is power, and we are all for power and freedom and knowledge. So thank you very much for everybody, and see you on the next show.